Hello, and welcome to the third installment of How to Write a Literary Criticism. At this point, I've been using the term literary criticism and literary biography interchangeably. And indeed, that's the way you should be framing it as well. Remember that you may be looking at the life of these individual authors, but more specifically, you're looking at the body of work which they created, either in theater, fiction, radio drama, and sometimes applying the events of their lives, but only if those events actually influence them. So today we're going to talk about specifically how to create a general and a detailed outline, traps that students often fall into, and measures that you can use to be successful in the writing process. Now, we talked about this in the last episode, but I want to reiterate this again. You should be focusing on areas, general areas like themes within their literature, staging techniques, innovations, influences, people who influence them or movements that influence them and how they influenced others, controversial materials, new perspectives that they brought to the stage and to the arena of theater. Again, areas you should avoid is simply a laundry list of the plays, awards they've received, and the biography of these individuals if it doesn't directly pertain and influence the body of writing which they did during their lifetime. So, before we get started, what I want you to do is go to the Blackboard site and print up a copy of both the general and the detailed outlines which I've provided for you. And once you've done that, come back to this video, press start again, and we'll continue. Now, the first step is writing a general outline. What I've provided for you is a standard 3-point general outline which is pretty utilitarian and widespread, you can use with widespread success. And I want you to pay attention to a couple of things in this general outline, and these are the fundamental traps that students fall into. First, if you notice in my 3 main points, and this of course is dealing with the writer Sophocles that we've covered already at this semester at this point during the semester of the class, I want you to note that I'm using action verbs, and I'm also giving direction to my 3 major areas of analysis. And let's look at point 1. Sophocles utilized innovative staging techniques to increase the dramatic impact of his tragedies. Now, I could have simply said staging techniques, but that's a static statement. It doesn't give your reader, someone who's helping you out like a professor or ultimately down the road a boss or an employer, the opportunity to know where you intend to go with that particular line of argumentation. Using an action verb gives it a dynamic sense. You have an intention, an argument that you're creating. Actually showing me where you intend to go is important as well. So again, I want you to pay attention between the simple statement, staging techniques, which doesn't have any dynamic sense, it's static, it sits there, and also the extra added phrase that I added on to the end to heighten dramatic impact, because it's showing me, and also it's providing a blueprint for you, a direction which you intend to develop as you continue to be more specific in developing these ideas for your research paper. So make sure you do that with all 3 of your major points. Use words like explored, highlighted, utilized, examined, revolutionized, revealed, challenged, because now those words inherently give you the dynamic sense that you're creating an argument, and it'll make the paper much more easier for you to write when you get to the rough draft phase in the next step of the process. Okay, now we're going to move down to the second level. And under point 1, we've got 2 subpoints, A and B. Now, I want to put these into an ideological perspective for you. Points 1, 2, and 3 are general ideas, and I want you really to think of those as a large umbrella. Now look at subpoints 1 and A and B that go under Roman numerals 1, 2, and 3. But under Roman numeral 1, about staging techniques, points A and B are like smaller umbrellas that fit under the larger umbrella. Ideologically, they both align. Incorporated scene painting to heighten drama and allow for change of venue, and increase the role of the chorus to facilitate a more robust stagement. Each of these 2 areas clearly ideologically fit under Roman numeral 1, but they're 1 level more of specificity. Now, these are still general enough that they ultimately are still not going to be a topic sentence when you get to actually constructing your rough draft, but again, you're starting to drill down. Roman numeral 1 gives you a large umbrella, a huge area that you can analyze. When you get to your subpoints A, B, and possibly C, now you're starting to drill down and create smaller umbrellas that fit under that, which still encompass a bunch of ideas that will allow you to develop them even further. And when we get to the next level with the detailed outline, now you're going to start creating actual topic sentences for your individual paragraphs. All right, so let's go there next. So let's assume that you've successfully constructed your general outline. Now you're moving to the detailed outline. And if you see, again, the example that I've printed up for you, we've used point A about staging techniques as your subject matter, something to give you a tutorial and some assistance. Notice then under Roman numeral 1, subpoint A, which is dealing with scene painting, I have two subpoints, or I should say sub-subpoints, under each of those 2 points. So under Roman numeral 1A, subpoint 1 and 2, I've got 3-sided periactoi and the groove system. Now look at how this matches up. Both of those sub-points, 1 and 2, clearly fit under the umbrella of A and under the umbrella of Roman numeral 1. So as I'm drilling down, each of those sub-points need to ideologically fit underneath the umbrella, the more general idea, as we move back up the food chain. Now at this point, for this particular paper, this is specific enough that these will ultimately become your topic sentences for each of your individual paragraphs. So what I want you to examine as you're constructing your general and detailed outlines is make sure that by the time you get to your sub-points 1 and 2, can you write an entire paragraph about that idea? If your sub-points is Tennessee Williams died in such and such a date, or Anton Chekhov was born on such and such a date, well, first of all, that's their life and their biography, not a literary criticism. But second, and more importantly, you really can't write an entire paragraph about that. So those sub-points 1, 2, and as we will discuss in just a second, perhaps even 3, need to be substantial enough as an idea that you can develop at least one substantial or major paragraph about that. And when we get to the writing of the rough draft, we'll talk about how you will develop that as well. Now, let's crunch the numbers a little bit. If you follow this method, this is a slam dunk, surefire way to write an easy 1,500-word research paper. Let's make a couple of assumptions. First, a sentence is approximately 20 to 25 words in length at a bare minimum. A paragraph needs to have approximately 5 to 6 sentences as a bare minimum structurally to be considered a substantial paragraph. So each paragraph that you ultimately construct is going to be approximately 100 to 125 words in length. Now let's go back to the outline that I provided you. Go to the detailed outline. Let's go back to point 1. We're talking about staging techniques again. We have 2 subpoints, A and B, under that, and 2 sub-subpoints, 1 and 2, under each A and B. If each of those sub-points, 1 and 2, about periactoi and the groove system, are a 1-paragraph component of the rough draft or final paper that you write, Roman numeral 1 has a minimum, a bare minimum of 400 words of content. If you do a standard 3-point analysis, now you're looking at a bare minimum of 1,200 words of content. If you add a 100-word introduction to set up your paper, a 100-word conclusion to wrap it up and give us a push that I'll talk about when we get to writing the rough draft and the final paper, that at a bare minimum is giving you the opportunity to write a 1,500-word paper. Now, with a couple of major tweaks to that, you can really increase that as well. If you add a 4th major area, Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, and 4, and keep the same formula I've given you, at a bare minimum, you've got approximately an 1,800-word research paper, probably pushing up to a 2,000-word research paper. And if you add a 3rd level of specificity under each of our 4 major points, in other words, sub-points 1, 2, and 3, ultimately, you're pushing the boundary of having probably a 2,600 or a 3,000-word research paper. And that blueprint is absolutely foolproof. Now, I want to highlight a couple of things here. First of all, I've included the idea of parallelism. And this parallelism basically means that under each of my Roman numerals, 1, 2, and 3, I have to have the same number of supporting subpoints. So if under Roman numeral 1, I have subpoints A and B, then I also have to have A and B under points 2 and 3. If I have 3 subpoints or sub-subpoints under Roman numeral 1A, where I have 1, 2, 3, I have to have 3 subpoints under all of my others as well. In other words, you're trying to create absolute balance within the structure of the paper. It shows pre-planning, it shows forethought, and it shows that you've taken those facts and you organize them in a meaningful way that they make sense together, not just as individual snippets of information. Now, over the years, I've also had students say, well, I don't really like to write using an outline. I simply like to sit down and start writing it. And here's the challenge that I would lay to you on that. No one goes out on a family vacation and simply says, we're driving to the West Coast, honey. We'll get there when we get there. Good travelers pre-plan where they're going to go along the way. Let's look at another metaphor. Writers, not only writers, but painters, don't simply sit down and craft masterpieces on canvas. Writers like Monet, like Salvador Dali, did sketches and they did drafts before they actually got to creating and crafting their final paintings, which we know and appreciate today. And writing is no different. If you give yourself a blueprint, it will allow you to, in a meaningful way, look at where you intend to go. And as we will discuss when we get to the rough draft in just a second, as the next step of your project and of your writing, once you've created these detailed outlines, and if you've done it in an effective way, literally, you have written approximately 20% of your paper, and you've done it in a meaningful way that will make writing the rough draft and the final paper a snap, and it won't be that daunting issue and that daunting assignment that many students stumble during their academic careers. So good luck. If you have any questions about it, please zip me an email, and I will talk to you soon when we get to the rough draft. Good luck.